Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen who attended the thematic discussion on grassroots democracy implementation in Vietnam, good practices and policy implementation. The discussions were organized by UNDP and the People's Participation Working Group, PPWG. That is an opportunity for us to share our international research findings and exchange policy and legal implications on implementing grassroots democracy from empirical research on some good practice models and policy implications. The study aims to promote good practices in the implementation of the ordinance implementing democracy in communes, wards, and townships 2007, and at the same time to contribute some ideas to the draft law on grassroots democracy implementation which is being discussed in the National Assembly. And the fact the Embassy of Ireland UNDP in Vietnam jointly funded this study. I would like to thank you for taking the time to attend the discussion. And coming to today's discussion, I would like to introduce Mr. Lê Quang Bình, Chair of the PPWG, Director of ECIU Social Enterprise, Head of the Research Team, Dr. Phạm Quang Tú, Vice Director of UpFund in Vietnam and Vice Chair of PPWG. Madam Diana Torres, Assistant Resident Representative, Head of Governance and Participation, UNDP. Dr. Nguyễn Quỳnh Liên, Director of Department for Democracy and Law, Central Committee of the Vietnam Fatherland Front. Professor Dr. Nguyễn Đăng Đăng, Vice Chairman of the Advisory Council for Democracy and Law, member of the Vietnam Fatherland Front Committee. Master Lê Trọng Vinh, former Deputy Director of Legal Department, Ministry of Home Affairs. Dr. Bùi Hải Phiên, member of the National Foundation for Science and Technology Development. And we also have the participation of representatives from domestic and international experts and representatives of news agencies and press in Vietnam and representatives of research co-sponsoring agencies. And today we will focus on two main topics. The first one is initial findings from the research on grassroots democracy implementation in Vietnam, some good practices and policy implications. And secondly, the lesson learned and policy implications from the implementation of the ordinance on the democracy implementation in communes. And if any of you would like to ask any questions, please feel free to type your questions into the comment box. And to start, I would like to invite Madam Diana Torres, Assistant Resident Representative, Head of Governance and Participation of UNDP, to deliver the opening remark.
Mr. Lê Quang Bình, Chair of the People's Participation Working Group, Director of EQ Social Enterprise, distinguished panelists, participants, colleagues from the People's Participation Working Group, representatives from provinces and districts across Vietnam, representatives from media agencies, ladies and gentlemen, everybody that is joining us today here online and in person in the Green One UN House. Welcome to today's discussion. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to our thematic discussion on the critical topic of grassroots democracy implementation in Vietnam, good practices and policy implementation. I think we all agree that this is a very timely discussion as the National Assembly is currently discussing and expecting to pass the new law on grassroots democracy implementation during the current fall sessions which are taking place right now. And to support the policy-making agencies during the development and implementation of the law on grassroots democracy since 2020, the People's Participation Working Group and UNDP in Vietnam have been conducting the action research enhancing citizens' participation in formulation and implementation of the grassroots democracy law. The research has an overarching goal of facilitating greater inclusive and people-centric governance in Vietnam. And considering the law on grassroots democracy, and it is a foundational for Vietnam's work on strengthening people-centered institutions to realize Vietnam's development motto, that is, people know, people discuss, people do, people verify, and people benefit. and the Sustainable Development Goals and the key principle of the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind, which is at the core of UNDP and the United Nations priorities in Vietnam, and which are one of the main, and which had been the public, and which is to make public institutions citizen-centric, transparency, responsible, and accountable to all. According to our findings from the PAPI survey, the Vietnam Provincial Governance and Public Administration Performance Index, very well known to all as PAPI, it has been showing that local government's performance in ensuring citizen participation in local decision-making, transparency, and vertical accountability towards citizens have been rated below or at the average levels, and it remains one of the main areas of large concern and with room for improvement, according to the latest data in since 2011, and according to the latest data as well. And in fact, indicators to measure these three core PAPI dimensions, repeating local decision-making, participation in local decision-making, transparency, and vertical accountability towards citizens, and other 5 dimensions that are encompassing in PAPI, they have evolved from the citizen-centric principles and expectations that are provided in the 2007 Ordinance on Grassroots Democracy implementation at the commune level. So this law and this ordinance are actually is quite at the basis and the background of our PAPI design and the indicators that we have been rolling out for more than 10 years already. So let me, in this same line, let me highlight some of the findings from PAPI evidence. For instance, on the people know and people discuss performance indicators, below 1/5 of the national respondents have been aware of local land plans since 2011 at the national aggregate level. And below 4% said that they had an opportunity to provide comments on the draft local land plans. Meanwhile, citizens' access to land information matters is perhaps the most important factor to help land disputes and conflicts, to help mediate and resolve land disputes and conflicts. Another area of improvement that we would like to suggest is regarding local government's performance in ensuring citizens' oversight, or what is called in the law the people supervise and people verify implications of local infrastructure projects. Over time, PAPI findings show that the local infrastructure projects commonly fail to benefit from citizens' oversight, as the percentage of respondents noting that the local community investment supervision board were in place to monitor projects was below 50% in most of the provinces over the last 12 years. So with this ongoing research, our research aims to contribute to improve local governance and local government's performance in the grassroots democracy implementation. What we are aiming is to get better insights and provide insights into the law and draw some lessons based on good models and good practices around citizen participation in monitoring, implementation, and citizens benefiting of local projects. We also like to propose and to provide policy recommendations for policy and legal documents to implement the grassroots democracy to foster citizens' rights to participate in local governance, including providing comments on the draft law on grassroots democracy implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear in greater detail today about the findings of the research process from Mr. Bin and Dr. Tung today. But please allow me to mention before 2 key points from the research that we think are of greater significance and we would like to highlight for discussion today. The first is there are already good practices of grassroots democracy that are initiated by mass organizations representing their people and by individual citizens themselves in Vietnam. And these are great examples of collective action for the public good to be materialized on citizens' voices. And once citizens' voices are heard and citizens are actively involved in local decision-making, we know that the policy-making will be more effective. And these community-based grassroots democracy implementation initiatives deserve to be better communicated and further replicated across the country. This is fundamental to ensure that Vietnam policy implementation continue moving ahead and is effective. and people-centered. The law on grassroots democracy implementation is a foundational legal document to consolidate and strengthen citizens' rights to participate and to vote participate. Especially with the good practices that will be highlighted in the research, will provide important evidence and implications for the central and local governments when it comes to implement the law on grassroots democracy implementation after the National Assembly passes and issues the law during these fall sessions. And finally, I don't want to take more of your time, but let me take this opportunity to that UNDP would like to highly appreciate the collaboration we have had with the People's Participation Working Group and its partners, and especially EQ and Oxfam Vietnam, to conduct this important research and very timely research. We also like to thank our partners, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia, DFAR, and the Embassy of Ireland, which has been very supportive through our activities on PAPI program. I really look forward to a very fruitful discussion today, and I hope that we are going to learn more and see how we can further support Vietnam in the implementation of the grassroots democracy law and continue strengthening a people-centered government approach across Vietnam moving forward. Thank you for listening and welcome again. Thanks.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bà Dana.
Thank you, Ms. Dana. I would like to invite Dr. Phạm Quang Tú, Vice Director of Farming Vietnam, Vice Chair of the People's Participation Working Group, to deliver the opening remarks. Ms. Dana Torres, Assistant Resident Representative, Head of Governance and Participation, UNDP in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, first of all, on behalf of the PPWG, I would like to thank you for spending your time to participate in the thematic discussion, Grassroots Democratic Implementation in Vietnam, Good Practices and Policy Implementation. I wish you good health and I wish our thematic discussion to be fruitful. Ladies and gentlemen, the PPWG was formed since 1999. It is a network including the organization individuals to exchange information and ideas on the issue related to people's participation in the social, economic development and sustainable development of Vietnam. PPWG aimed at contributing and building an inner developed society, community development, and capable of dealing with the social, economic issues and environmental issues in Vietnam. We believe that the full and quality participation of the people in policy making and socio-economic development activity is the necessary conditions, prerequisite conditions, and significant conditions in sustainable development of any country. That's why the development of a government of rules, the democratic society for the people and for the people is really important in Vietnam. As you know, the 20th of April 2007, the NASC Legislation 11 issues the Ordinance 34/2007 regarding democracy implementation at the ward and township. This is considered a big progress in institutionalization and implementation of democracy in Vietnam. With the principle of the people to know, to discuss, to do, to check, supervise, and benefit for the ordinance of implementation of democracy, grassroots democracy, we've got progress in localities. After 15 years of implementation, as assessed by the government of Vietnam, the ordinance of grassroots democracy have shortcomings and not commensurate with the international integration and social development of Vietnam. Some regulation in the Ordinance 34 are not commensurate with practice, and the activities are superficial and not meeting the needs of the people. at the grassroots level and are not in compliance with the regulations of law in Vietnam, especially the laws issued after the Ordinance 34, for example, the law on the anti-corruption law, the referendum law, or the law on organization of local government. In addition, implementation of democracy principles and transparency in operation of local government have shortcomings and lack of transparency, not reflecting the role of the administrative unit at the local level. With those limitations, we highlight the fact that the National Assembly of Vietnam have revised and enhanced the ordinance of grassroots democracy to the law on implementation of grassroots democracy to implement well the Constitution of Vietnam regarding the people's rights and to ensure the sync and the compliance to the law regulations in Vietnam, to receive the positive feedback and comments from the National Assembly with the cooperation of UNDP and our donors. Recently, the PPWG have coordinated with the consultants to conduct the studies for the grassroots democracy implementation in Vietnam, good models and policy implementations. Today, we are very glad to organize this thematic discussion to share the findings of the research or study with you so that we can provide the comments and to provide the policy implications. The content of the thematic discussion have been mentioned in the agenda as well as in Ms. Danator's opening remarks. I hope that we will have a fruitful and participatory discussion. Once again, on behalf of the PPWG, I would like to thank you so much for your participation in our thematic discussion today. Our thanks to donors UNDP to have supported us and to organize this thematic discussion. Our thanks to UNDP to locate us and to provide a very good venue for us today. So our thanks to the offline participants. Wish you good health and wish we have a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tu, for your opening remark. And now, next on the agenda, I would like to invite all of you to the next part, which is the initial findings from the research grassroots democracy implementation in Vietnam, good practices and policy implications, conducted by PPWG and UNDP, and Mr. Bình and then Dr. La Khánh Tung will represent this information for us. And Mr. Bình is the director of EQ and social enterprise on women empowerment and gender equality. And he's also supporting people from ethnic minorities, and he also participates in various activities. And he received a Fulbright program to study public policy in the U.S. A very good morning to all of you, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for organizing this thematic discussion, and thank you all for coming here today and listen to some initial findings from the research on grassroots democracy implementation, some good practices and policy implications. So our research is highly interactive, and you can see that we have a huge team of researchers, and we have different backgrounds working in different agencies. For example, Mr. Tung working at the Law University, and Dr. Trương Hồng Quang is from the Ministry of Justice, and Dr. Chung is from another agency, and em Đỗ Thanh Huyền from UNDP, Hương from Oxfam, and Minh from EQ. And you can see that we have a big team, and you know, we are not like professional lawyers, and we are not like professional researchers. So when we conduct this studies, we have to analyze a lot of legal documents. For example, the ordinance on grassroots democracy implementation in commune, and we also talk with the community. So due to the time constraint, we decided that we will conduct a case study, and we try to find out the good practices at the local level. So we will look that when a infrastructure project is implemented or when activities is implemented, what factors that facilitate the participation of the citizen in the implementation of those projects and activities. So by talking to the people, and we come up with some conditions that facilitate the participation of the local people in the local governance. And from that, we come up with some policy implications and recommendations for the policy and law-making progress in the present and the future time. And I hope that the findings from this research will provide some input for organizations who would like to facilitate the participation of the local people. So the objectives of our research is to analyze some good models with people's participation in supervising, deploying, and benefiting from projects at the grassroots level. And secondly, we draw lessons learned to promote grassroots democracy implementation through people's participation. And we got two research questions. What are the necessary conditions for people to participate effectively? And second one, how should the legal framework should institutionalize such conditions? Okay, so the field studies were taken place in Quảng Trị and Hanoi, and we conduct various interviews in September 2022. And I would like to talk about the community team members. We also talk to local people, the chairs of local Vietnamese women unions, Vietnam fatherland committees, and chairmen by chairpersons of Communist People's Committees, and some agencies supervised by the people, like the schools, medical facilities, and members of apartment management boards. So we talked to the organizations and agencies who are supposed to be supervised by the local people. And apartment management boards are quite common in big cities like Hanoi when we have a lot of residential areas. So there are 4 models in Quảng Trị and 3 in Hanoi. So I will talk about the model in Quảng Trị. So here we can see that in Hải Định Commune, Hải Đăng District, the people participate in the dialogue on communal budget revenue and expenditure. So at the commune, they have a communal budget, and via the community supervision team, they will talk to the People's Committee and the People's Council to supervise the spending of the communal budget. And in this dialogue, the people will ask questions regarding the communal budget revenue and expenditure, and the local government have to answer those questions. The second one is in the Đông Hà city. In these days, the people supervised the construction of the community cultural center. So in the city, there are many constructions going on, and here the people have the opportunity to participate in the construction of the cultural center, and they got the opportunity to judge in every step of the way by the design, the construction, and the spending, etc. The next model we look at is related to ethnic minorities. and in Zaoling district of Linchuang commune, and that is like a poor commune. So I would like to look at how people supervise the implementation of social welfare policies to ethnic minorities, for example, the construction policies, education policies. And I would like to learn how they supervise the implementation of those policies and whether their voice are taken into account. And the next one is the model on supervising vaccination and medical services in Giao Viên commune, Zaoling district. So that is the 4 models in Quảng Trị. Actually, that is at the hamlet level. And the core of the community groups as members of the women's unions. So we can see that most of the members are women. And that is a pilot project funded by Oxfam, and the Oxfam project aimed at building the capacity for the local people so that they know which areas they should supervise and what questions they should ask the local government agencies. And the people in those groups also get a small fund for their work, go back and forth to the supervision site. And in Hanoi, we focus on 3 models. The first one is in Tuy Lai commune and Mỹ Đức district, which is in the outskirts of Hanoi. And it is on the local environment protection and the new countryside project. The second model is in Cầu Giấy, Thanh Xuân district, and building and management board. So I think the building management board is not new, however, it is quite interesting. You know that the residential area management board, they have the rights to manage a huge fund, which is the renovation and maintenance fund, and they have the right to manage this fund. And the people in the building, they have the right to vote for the members of the management board. So it's supposed to have democracy there, right? And the members of the management board, they have to make decision over the affairs related to the building. So we can see that the mandates and the responsibilities of the management board will be set down in the law in construction. So we would like to look at this model to see if democracy really happens. And the last model in Hanoi is in Trương Dương Ward, Hoàn Kiếm district, on rehabilitating the environment at the riverbank area. So usually when the people find out that it is very necessary to improve the environment where they live, or they find that it is very important to work with the local authorities to improve the environment. Okay, so that is the 4 models in Quảng Trị and 3 in Hanoi. Could you please help me to keep the time to make sure that I can finish on time? Okay, so when we look at these models, we can clearly see that the people's participation has brought about positive changes. The first one is in Tuy Lai. We can see that the environment has been greatly improved. So in this commune 2020, they had a serious problem on garbage collection. And you can look at the picture on the left. The roads are covered with garbage. And then when the people work with the garbage collection agency and the local authority, we can see that things change, right? And now we can see that the roads are very beautiful now. So in order to keep the roads clean, they grow flowers there. And then the village is very beautiful and covered with blossom flowers. So flowers are grown in any public areas that are not being used. So thanks to the participation of the people, we can see great changes. And the next one, when the citizens are more aware of how much money was contributed and spent, many changes have happened. First, when they participated in the dialogue, they know how the budget is spent. So, when they have a dialogue, they get the information and they remember the information very well. And once they know that the money they contributed is well spent, then they are more willing to contribute more. For example, when they contribute to the fund for the poor, and they know that the fund is used effectively to help the poor, then they can contribute more. Or they will be more willing to contribute to the fund to relieve the floods.
Rất là rõ ràng, căn phải báo cáo rất là chính xác mà người ta sẽ hỏi. Và đặc biệt là khi bất cứ một cái khoản thu chi nào mà liên quan đến người dân ấy,
they know that they have to answer the questions regarding the budget expenditures and revenues. They have to spend the money more responsibly. And the next point we realized is the attitude of the people working at the school or the medical facilities. You can see that in Viet. In the past, people were reluctant to go to the medical facilities for medical care because they complained about the attitude of the health workers. And they complained that if they didn't come on time, they were sent home and they didn't get any suggestions or reminders from the health workers. But thanks to the supervision of the local people, the attitude of the staff at the medical facilities have been greatly improved. The next example is that the quality of meals at boarding schools have been greatly improved when the meals are supervised by the people. And we can see that the community control centers have better designed and better used, and the quality and the design of the community cultural centers better aligned with the community's needs, and garbage dumps have been removed, and green public space and have been created for children. So before I pass my mic to the next presenter, I would like to talk about the findings we have. First, in order to make sure that the community and the people can participate, it should happen at the humble level. because it is right at home, it is right in their neighborhood, and it is easier for them to supervise. So I think it is very important that the supervision should happen at the hamlet level. And second, from the models in Hanoi, we find out that besides the roles of the Fatherland Front law, Fatherland Front, and the women's unions, we should involve media agencies as well. For example, when we talk about an environment protection project, people complained that while we try to report about the environmental pollution in our hamlet to the commune and then to the district, then to the city, but we didn't receive the response timely. But once it's reported by the media, the issue won't be solved promptly. So we can see that the media and news agency played a very important role. They can report about the issues, and by doing that, the local authorities may have more responsibilities. The next thing I would like to say is that they should have some budget for the people, the local people, to discuss, to exchange the information, and it involves resources, right? So we need to allocate the resources and the budget so that the people can participate in supervision activities. The next thing is that we should warrant the rights of minority groups and vulnerable groups. For example, the women, ethnic minority, persons with disabilities, and temporary residents to participate. You know, they are somehow left behind, and to make sure that they can participate, they need to be prioritized. For example, Vân Kiều ethnic people, they can talk their local language, but they cannot write their local language. So in order to make sure that they understand the information, there should be like a method that are accessible to them. For example, instead of translating into their local language, we should have like podcast or YouTube, or it should be in voice instead of in writing. And next, the people's participation rights must be protected and institutionalized, and Mr. Tung will talk more in details about that. And I want to say that if the local authorities are not accountable, then the people's voice will not be taken into account. And last but not least, I would like to say that at the moment we have a lot of regulations about the contents, forms, and processes for people to discuss, provide comments, and make decisions. But I would like to say that it's very important for the people to participate in supervising the activities at the commune level. And then they need to participate in any activities that close to them. For example, when a new road is going to be built in their hamlet or the commune, then the local people should be able to participate. For example, the contractor, when they build the road, then the local people have to contribute. For example, they have to contribute like 10 million dong, about $450, because they contribute. But they don't have the right to supervise how the money is spent. It is, not very fair and effective, right? But once they can participate, they can see that, oh, you don't need that much money. We only need to contribute half of that, like $200 is enough. And you know, like the local people, they want to have the right to supervise, and they want to have the right to say no to some activities. And the local people also want to supervise public services like education or healthcare because it's very close to home. And they would like to supervise if the local budget is well spent or not. And they want to supervise that. So that's the 6 important points that we get from our field work. And the next part, how these conditions can be institutionalized, I would like to pass the mic to my colleague, Mr. Tung.
To continue with my college, I would like to have 10 minutes to provide some recommendations and our expectation for the draft law on grassroots democracy implementation. We recognize that democracy is a very noble and significant definition or concept in countries. But here, grassroots democracy is quite artificial, highly artificial. That's why the consensus for this definition is difficult to be achieved widely, because in countries they mostly have local democracy or local ownership. Yesterday, the youth newspaper reported that 80 businesses in Vietnam proposed to the NA not to include the scope of businesses in the law on grassroots democracy. And there was a letter that also they support grassroots democracy, but please don't include the businesses because there are content coincide with the supervisory board of the people and the secrecy of the businesses. So it would be difficult for the businesses. And we can see that democracy is related to autonomy and ownership. For example, what people would like to plan or to have a park or not. So democracy, basically, it requires the minimization of the state intervention. But you know, a building state, it can, a creative or building state, it can enable the commune level in Vietnam. And another aspect that you see that democracy is broad, including the social, political, civil rights, including the election and transparency or accountability of the central level. So if you understand it in a narrow sense, it is not enough, and we need more positive changes, broader changes. Here we raise the characteristics of the draft law. On the one hand, it is taken lead by the Ministry of Home Affairs. It is an inheritance of the ordinance on commune township. And then the chapter 1 is on general provision. The chapter 2 on democracy at the ward and township, and they are scattered. And then the right-based approach are not clear, and they are more inclined to the higher level, to top-down level. So from the studies and our observation, we propose the recommendations. We think that grassroots democracy focus mainly on the hamlet and village level and residential area level. And our recommendation is that in the current draft law, we have only provide the people supervision board, but this is established at the commune level only. For the commune level, it is quite large. We have small commune for villages, but some are big, including 20 hamlets, and some border commune. It is 100 kilometers, square kilometers in Quảng Ninh, for example. So the two boards of the people are too big. The role of each of them are big. So in order to empower the people to create the supervisory board or the supervisory residential board, it's quite closer to the people, and it is in line with the principles of balancing the power and the cross supervision. Instead of having the residential area head supervision, if we have a collective unit or collective group voted at the ward or township level, it will be better. And in the history of Vietnam, there are times when there were collectives formed at the self-governing level. So in the second chapter, we need to add the people's right to vote, the community supervisory board. Somebody may say that it is the ownership or decision of the people. It is included in the definition for other agencies or the people's self-established organization. But if it's not stipulated in the law, it will be difficult for this change. So we need to provide for this community investment supervision board and people's inspection board in the law. And then the inclusion of the mass media people and social organization. The scope is expanded, not just the local staff, but also all the civil servants are under the supervision of the people. So in this draft law, we can expand to this level, plus the local projects in the hamlet and village. It should be under the supervision scope of the people, for example, in relation to the labor code or the law on environmental protection. The third recommendation, we think we need to increase the accountability and handling of sanctions regarding the management of grassroots democracy. You see that the accountability, nothing is better than election or voting. We need to have reforms on elections so that people have the supervisory roles and to select the leaders of their locality. But for the immediate future, we need to have more regulations on obligations. For example, the reporting mechanism on implementing the grassroots democracy principles, and we can revise some regulations. And we should include the people's or civilians' rights. And the fourth recommendation, publicity should go along with transparency. Not just by sending 10-page document, we can call it easier for understanding. We need to add the stipulation. For example, when we have 15% of the ethnic minority people in a commune, information need to be translated into the ethnic language. And we have to pay attention to the language aspect. Fifth, the scope of people's decision-making and discussion. What about the beneficiaries aspect? It's not quite clear for the people. It can be indirect or direct beneficiary, or it's not necessarily related to materialistic things. Also, the public services or the quickening of the process of administrative procedure. Here, we think that the beneficiary need to be related to the state budget at the commune level. The people need to have a voice in the commune budget. Budgeting, people need to have the right to discuss and make decisions on that as well. To encourage people's participation, in addition to mental communications and educations incentives, we need to have incentives as well. For example, a gift or some meals, it can encourage people's participation. So financial regulations need to be adjusted. Seventh, in Vietnam, we have characteristics. For example, we have the system of fatherland front at all level, and in urbanization of Vietnam, there have been the dorms, the condos in Vietnam. The management of the condo is a mechanism. So in the law, we need to have coordination among these agencies, and there should be the consistency in the terms of individual citizens and legislations as well. So because of the time constraint, they are just some of my points. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Lê Quang Bình and Mr. La Khánh Tùng. To continue, we will have the panel discussion on experience and policy implementation, good practices. Mr. Lê Quang Bình, Director of EQ, Ms. Đỗ Thanh Huyền, UNDP Vietnam, will chair this discussion, and other participants. Dr. Nguyễn Quỳnh Liên, Director of the Department for Democracy and Law, Professor Dr. Nguyễn Đăng Dung, Vice Chair of the Advisory Council on Democracy and Law, member of the Central Committee of Vietnam for the Land Front, Mr. Lê Trọng Vinh, former Vice Director of the Legislative Department, Ministry of Home Affairs, Dr. Bùi Hải Thiêm, member of the National Foundation for Science, Technology Development, and Dr. Phạm Quang Tú, Oxfam in Vietnam, Vice Director. Thank you so much for the online and offline participants. To date, in our room, we have 60 participants and roughly 100 people online. So it reflects the wide participation and attention from experts. We have experts. Professor Phạm Duy Nghĩa from Fulbright University. He is observing online a lot of scholars and researchers about the practicing of grassroots democracy. We also have the senior people in democracy and law, for example, Mr. Đỗ Duy Thường or Mr. Phạm Văn Tân from VUSTA. We would like to thank all of you who are the speakers in our session today. This is a very initial study, and it is a chance for us to share the good practices and the discussion on policy implementation on those good practices. We will have stars to be highlighted. We will not talk much about the study because we need time to finalize the final report and send to you. But in the panel discussion, we will focus more on the practical experience shared to you. And if the speakers know any more of the models, you can share with us so that the participants can contribute more to promote the implementation of grassroots democracy in the coming time. After being adopted by the National Assembly, each speaker or panelist will have 5 minutes, and I do hope that they will share their viewpoint. And I would like all the participants in the Zoom today and online participants to prepare the questions so that we can deliver to the speakers or panelists. We know that we acknowledge that 2 panelists have to leave. Ms. Nguyễn Quỳnh Liên, she will have a meeting at 10:30, and Professor Đăng Dung, he excused for leaving at 11 because he will have the 12:30 flight to Ho Chi Minh City on business. So to start our discussion now, I would like to listen to the sharing from Dr. Nguyễn Quỳnh Liên. She is Director of the Department for Democracy and Law, the Central Committee of the VFF. She's a doctor on law and administrative law. She has been working at the MOJ since 2004, and before she worked for the VFF, Vietnam for the Land Front, and now she's in charge of supervising and providing criticism under the duties of the law department of the VFF. She is passionate in participating in researching and lawmaking projects, for example, on practicing of grassroots democracy, religions, communication on gender equality, child protection, protection of people with disabilities, denunciation, and other areas. Thank you so much for your participation. After listening to Mr. Bing's presentation and recommendations from Mr. Khanh Tung, what do you suggest, and from the point of view of the person who in charge of supervision and criticism under the law department of the Vietnam Fatherland Front, in order to have effective grassroots democracy practicing, what should we do and what should we promote? First of all, my greetings to all the participants today. Dear our speakers and our teacher Dang Dung, and our senior revolutionary soldiers, Mr. Thương, you can have questions for them because they are really senior in this area. We have to learn a lot from our teacher, our professors in completion of the institutions and the functions of the VFF as the full core agency in implementing the democracy rights of the people. So thank you for your study and your good practices, showing the lesson learned and experience from the grassroots level, which is nearest to the people. Through the two presentations, we can see a lot of good models, good practices, and there are also the needs from the practice from the people themselves in the process of residing and having livelihoods in their land. They show their responsibilities to the community where they live. They also show their expectations to the state agencies, and the state agency also meet the very basic needs of the people. You also provide the assessment models showing the good impacts of these models to the operations of the organization at the grassroots levels. They are very valuable lessons in the process of completing the institutions to ensure the practicing of grassroots democracy. The lesson learned, the experience will be the practical grounds for us to have more comprehensive assessment. Law is general, and it is built from practices. Laws cannot be away from practices. If we set the institution that is away from people's needs, it will not be good. We need to reflect the practical messages so that the law can meet the needs of the people and to be feasible. So they are the very good lesson learned. Thank you. My thanks to the study teams, the evaluation team. The recommendation from Dr. La Thanh Tung is also very good. We are from VFF. We are participating in the draft law on grassroots democracy implementation. Your recommendation will enable us to, during the process when we participate in the NA, the National Assembly Standing Committee, and to guide the activities of the People Supervisory Board and then the Supervisory Board for better implementation of this board. For Ms. Huyen's questions, I think that from the principles of people's knowing, discussion, doing, checking, supervising, and benefiting, the whole legal system is aimed toward this principle, not just the ordinance on grassroots level democracy implementation. The whole political system needs to ensure this guideline. So in all the legal normative documents, in all areas or fields, we need to ensure the principle of people's knowledge, and we need to govern all the issues around people's knowing, people's discussion, where people can discuss, can voice, can contribute their ideas and initiatives for the state management issues. So in the some laws, we also provide this concept. In different fields or spheres, we need to have people's opinion and to have dialogues and to explain to the people. So it is a progress for the whole political system, the legal system, and people check, people supervise and benefit are regulated in the law. And to the draft law on grassroots level democracy implementation, during the process of formulating it, we were going hand in hand with the Ministry of Home Affairs. What is the grassroots level? Grassroots level is where it has a close contact with the people. And Dr. Tung just mentioned that we expand more grassroots level to the previous ordinance because now we attach to the civil servant, public employee, and the workers. Whenever we have attachment to the people's and civil servants, it won't be the grassroots democracy. Of course, we elevate from the sub-law document, but this draft law will have broader governing scope. The recommendations, the models and contents of grassroots democracy, as mentioned by two speakers, are provided in details in this draft law. We had meetings with the legal committee. The four content paid attention to by people, for example, the expenditure of the budget or the investment or PPP, or the people's contributed project, or the project when the state have policies for implementation of the rural or mountainous development. So all the contents have been included in the draft law with different forms to ensure the practice of grassroots level democracy. What do people know? What do people discuss? And how people do check, supervise? Which channels are available for the people? So they are the policy implementations, and your recommendations are quite proper. So we try to detail to the utmost level so that our people have legal basis to implement the law. Regarding the recommendation on the models, in implementing the grassroots democracy, we have the People's Inspection Board and Community Investment Supervision Board. They are the very focal board in order to implement the grassroots democracy at the ward township, so that people have their own organization to implement and supervise what they are interested in. Earlier, we discussed and changed the People's Inspection Board into the Community Inspection Board, but you know the People Inspection Board has historical implication, and the name imply the meaning, and it showed the objective of the policy when it is established. Now we agree to keep the name of People's Inspection Board, but the scope of operations and responsibilities are adjusted to ensure that it is an institution that can deliver effectively in the process of ensuring the grassroots level democracy implementation, especially in the commune, ward, and township. When we develop the decree detailing this, we will form the People's Inspection Board at the commune level established by the communes. It should be attached to the community people, the hamlet and village models, so that it is in line with all the geographical conditions and practical conditions. Some communes have several tens of hamlets, and some have scattered populations density. That's why the way the People's Inspection Board operates need to be effective, so that it can fill the gaps and to overcome the perfunctoriness of the board. So in developing the decree from the policy recommendation of Mr. Tung, we will adjust and to make it more appropriate. And the Community Investment Supervision Board, it stems from the law on public investment. As with our role, the VFF is guiding the institution. We are doing surveys and assessment on the strengths and weaknesses of this board. Each project will have a community investment supervision board. What is its functions and duties? There will be shortcomings. So if we have the basic regulations in the draft law and in the law on public investment, we will further include them into the decree. How a commune include or establish the community investment supervision board? Another thing is the condition to ensure the operation of these institutions. We are considering and we are wondering, because we empower the people, we approach them and their institutions, but the efficiency need to be ensured with the resources. First of all, the people, the human resources, the manning. Are the people capable? The law provide that they should be qualified and knowledgeable, but knowledge in the new area like supervision in community investment, they need to be knowledgeable in many areas. It can be beyond their knowledge, the knowledge of the community people. So the lesson learned is how to have capacity building. So when we develop the decrees or the guiding regulations, we need to go into more practical guarantee conditions. For example, the budgeting, if we promote people's ownership, economic conditions are not decisive. It is capacity, it is attraction of that activity against people's responsibilities. Not just the material things, not just the monetary term, not just the costs, not just the fees or allowance for the participants. The warranty conditions to promote what you call the initiative or proactiveness of the people for communities affairs. Regarding the autonomy or ownership, it's really important. The model you share is to strengthen the ownership and then the initiative of the people. We need to have clear regulation to strengthen the ownership and autonomy of the people so that people can propose their initiatives and to implement their own community activities. When people have initiatives, when people take part in actively, what will be the role of the local governments in respect in ensuring the initiatives, the proposals and contributions, proactiveness of the people in implementing their ownership at the grassroots level where they live. So they are very good policy recommendations. Thank you a lot. I have noted down. I will be together with the Ministry of Home Affairs, and from the VFF we will have the guidelines for these activities. We will try to institutionalize them to provide a comprehensive legal framework.
Okay, thank you very much for your response. And when we implementing the ordinance on grassroots democracy implementation, since it is assumed, and according to Pew finding, there's a question. Do you know about the existence of something called the People's Inspection Board? Actually, the people who say yes, it means they know about this People's Inspection Board is quite low, like usually lower than 50%, and the average is only 30%. And I hope that in the coming time, when we have the new law on democracy, and the law will introduce some ways to engage the people by increasing the attractiveness or the ownership of the peoples, and we also need to engage the local social organizations, and I hope that our models will be scaled up. Now I would like to pass the mic to Mr. Bing. Okay, thank you very much. When I look at the field studies, there are many good points, but I think it is very important, prerequisite, that we should have a mechanism at the grassroots or the hamlet or village level. So at the moment, we got some mechanism at the communes level, and of course the mechanism is important. However, it is not enough. At the commune, we have only a few staff and they have a lot of work to do. So if we want to engage the participation of the local people, we should introduce a new mechanism, I think. So do you think there is any ways that we can further engage the people at the grassroots level? So thank you very much, Ms. Lien, for your recommendations. And the next one I would like to talk to is Mr. Vinh. So as far as I know, Mr. Vinh participates in the drafting of the law, and you also work on the law on referendum, the law on access to information, law on civil judgment enforcement, law on the Coast Guard, law on demonstration, law on association, etc. So you have a lot of experience in this field. So my question for you, Mr. Vinh, so based on your experience, what is the condition for people to exercise their democratic rights? Good morning. It is my great honor and pleasure to participate in this thematic discussion. And first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I have been working for the ministry for like over 30 years, and I have been working for more than 14 years. And since the incident happened in Thái Bình in 1988, then I was there at Thái Bình at that time. And then in 1990, and the political bureau issued a decision governing 5 points on grassroots democracy. And later on, the decision 29 was issued. And few years after that, in 2003, we got Decree 71. And after 9 years of implementation of the Decree 29, it was assessed that the regulations in that decree was not sufficient and was not really realistic. So later on in 2007, the ordinance on grassroots democracy implementation was issued. So that's the history of grassroots democracy, and I have been working on grassroots democracy for a while, and I have some experience on this, and I would like to keep it short. Since the country was established, until now we have 5 versions of the constitutions, and there's hundreds of legal documents pertaining legal democracy. And there have been a lot of researches, but I think we should come back to the basic. What is the nature of democracy? Your question is about the conditions to promote democracy, but I think to answer that question, we need to understand the nature of democracy first. So in my understanding, the transparency organization, they define democracy as publicity and transparency. And if we can ensure the publicity and transparency, no corruption could ever occur. If everything is public and everything is transparent, the rights of the citizens won't be realized. So the first thing we need to do is to ensure that the people know. Only when they know, they can discuss, they can supervise, and they can check. But what is the ultimate goal? Of course, we would like to, build our country, right? We need to, develop our nation. But the ultimate goal is to promote the ownership of the people. And actually, I have been thinking about this a lot. I really want to have like one whole chapter on the democracy rights. We have different rights, like the right, economic rights, political rights, education rights. But so far, I don't think that we have like a separate chapter talking about the democracy rights of the people. But so far, I think the ordinance and the draft law have covered the basics of democracy. And when I look at those documents, it's the regulations or the relations between the government, the enterprises, and the organizations with the people. But I think it hasn't fully conveyed the nature of democracy. First and foremost, democracy is the goal of all countries in the world, not only Vietnam. So in the preamble of our constitution, it says the people organized to develop the constitution of Vietnam and the government of the people for the people. And we are aiming at having a strong country, a fair country, and a civilized country. And our Uncle Ho Chi Minh also quote the Constitution of the America and the France. So for a nation, it is the right to independence. But for a citizen, it's the right to happiness. It's the right to be treated fairly. The things we have been talking about, like people know, discard, do, check, supervise, and benefit, is the method. And that is the way to implement democracy and to realize the democracy rights of the citizen. So that's my understanding. Oh, thank you very much. So could you please talk more about your experience? So we are talking about grassroots democracy. What things need to be done? Yes. So on the one hand, I highly appreciate the draft law, and on the other hand, I suggest that we should clarify the 5 viewpoint of the parties. So first, we need to streamline the administrative procedures. And secondly, we need to do more with the publicity. So in the a digital era 4.0, we need to have different methods to publicize the information. And third, it would be good if we have a chapter on the rights to democracy in the law. For example, talking about the political rights, they have the right to vote, the right to do things, the rights to be voted or to be assigned to some political roles. And for economic rights, we also have like specific regulations. But so far, we haven't got any like clear regulations on the right to democracy. Of course, we got some guiding principles set out in our constitution, but it should be specialized. And in the 14.1 of the constitution, the state realized the human rights and ensured the realization of that right. But in order to implement this, we need law. So I really hope that this law will like gather the human rights from other laws to create a framework law, including the democracy rights. And in Directive 30, saying that democracy should go hand in hand with the legal framework. In other words, like we want to promote democracy, but we need to ensure that the laws are fully observed. And human rights can be limited if that rights create harmful effects to the sovereignty, the safety, and the rights of other people. So, I think it would be better if in the law we have some regulations on prohibited acts and the sanctions applicable when violations happen. The next thing I would like to say, the fourth point, that is the check and balance and power check and balance. So in previous documents, they say that in the meetings of the People's Council, the People Committee have to report on the implementation of grassroots democracy, and also on the law on supervision of the People's Committee. People's Council is saying that the PC has the obligation to report to the People's Council on the implementation of the work, and it also required the officials to have dialogues with the people. So, when we look at the organization of the local government, we can say that the organization of local government should be in line with the situations of that local conditions. So we can see that in some areas they don't have the commune level, and in some cities like Da Nang or Ho Chi Minh City, they don't have the People's Council. So if we don't have, clear regulations, then the people, they don't know where to go to when they have complaints. So, At the moment, we are piloting the local government organization models. So I think if this law is implemented, then we need to take into account that each local government may have different structures. Okay, so in summary, you say that we need a clearer regulations, right? For example, on the rights of the people, and I think this is very important. I know that you are very passionate on this topic, and we still have more opportunity. So I would like to move on to with the next panelist, Dr. Dung. So he has to leave quite early to take a flight. So I would like to ask you to say some words.
I will be very concise. First of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and to recognize the familiar faces. I like it a lot. Regarding the draft law, I have some writings. You can find them on the internet. First, I see the definition or the concept of what is grassroots democracy is not there. When we have them in the commune, ward or township, they are under the law on organization of the local government, which is a very large-scale law. Commune, ward, and township is a level of administration. The draft of the previous ordinance, there was a misunderstanding between grassroots level democracy and grassroots local authority or government. So coming back to the village level, hamlets, I agree with Mr. Bing. Sorry, I was not here right from beginning to catch up with all the presentation. In Mr. Bing's presentation, he mentioned about the community group. It is a new concept, but it includes the hamlet, village, tribes. Especially in our city, they are the condo or the apartment buildings. The democracy stemmed from Athens. It includes the community and territory. And Mr. Bing mentioned that they have budget, they have rich budget. So in the ordinance and then the draft law, there haven't been any word reflecting the word like community, territory, sustainability, and in the democracies there should be decisions making. You only provide the issues of people to know, to discuss, to check, supervise, and benefit, but to the party congress we include the word benefit, but it not as high as decision making. So at the level of village or hamlet level, there should be decision making. I repeat what I just mentioned earlier. I am from Nam Định, so I was raised in a village. I and my brother, he's now in the countryside, I'm in the city. He said to me that I and my villagers pay the money to build the road. That's why we have to supervise the road. It is money from me and my relatives. We called upon their contributions. So remember the Taiping province, they collect the money and then they do something else. So that is the grassroots democracy. We need to have supervisions participation and checking. Secondly, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor. I ask my students or my teaching assistant, how's your class? He said that, they are still studying online. All our pupils would like to learn online. Oh, you violate the law, I told him. It's not the grassroots level democracy. So you know what is grassroots democracy, what is law violations. You make your own decision to break the law. It's not good. So why should I in support of Mr. Bing and the team? Because he mentioned about the community groups. The village of Vietnam is really honorable. It has the village conventions or rules. We learn from other countries or Western countries, but we don't see their village conventions. But here in Vietnam we have village conventions and rules. Why don't we learn by our own, on our own convention? So we need to identify and learn clearly about the definition of grassroots level democracy is where the community is. And then businesses, you cannot say democracy with the businesses or the enterprises. I signed the contract with the contractor who pays the money, who signed the contract with me to work at 12 midnight. So I told him that it's a violation of human rights. I want to work in the morning. No, because you are contracted to me to work in midnight. So when we expand to the enterprises, even SOEs, it's not possible, it's not feasible. And also administrative, public administrative unit. So we should define the focus of the governing scope of the grassroots democracy. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Zoom. As he shared, it's quite core. It's related to the community, residents, and then the decision-making rights from the people, from the community is really significant. And then supervision and checking is needed, especially at the commune, village, hamlet level. And then we will talk more about condos or apartment buildings. Now we will come to Ms. Huyền. Thank you, Mr. Dung, Mr. Vinh, and Ms. Liên. Because Ms. Liên will have a meeting today, so I would like to invite Ms. Hồng to come instead. Ms. Hồng is the Deputy Director of the Department on Law and Democracy of VFF. Our thanks to Dr. Bùi Hải Thiêm, who is passionate about the researches related to the roles of the CSOs, of the social organizations, and he's paying interest to the people's participation at the administrative level. Dr. Bùi Hải Thiêm is a member of the Interdisciplinary Science Council, National Foundation for Science Technology Development, NAFOSTES. He used to hold the position of the head of Scientific Professional Management Department, deputy head of the General Department, member of the Scientific Council at the Institute for Legislative Studies under the National Assembly Standing Committee, standing deputy head of the National Assembly Standing Committee, assisting in drafting the resolution of the National Assembly Standing Committee, promulgating the regulations on management of science technology. Now he keep learning and teaching in many institutions domestically and internationally. I hope that Dr. Thiêm can have some suggestion regarding promoting the efficiency of laws in implementation of grassroots democracy. Thank you, Ms. Huyền. UNDP to have created the forum for me to participate and voice my idea with other renowned panelists. There have been eloquent statement from Dr. Dung and MSc Lê Trọng Vinh, I have some overlaps in my point of views. I have been listening to presentation from the evaluation team and 3 previous panelists' comment. I've seen 2 points. Since I first listened to the presentation, I shared with them regarding the 2 points on the institutions, such a draft law and the inheritance from the previous documents, such as decree, ordinance, and thousands of documents, as mentioned by Dr. Vinh. Since our reforms to date, the forecast of the draft law and the forms of internalizing is the administrative levels institutions. Combining with Professor Zung's comments, I agree that the concept of democracy, the focus of democracy is the decision making and how to make decisions. The other 2 values mentioned by Dr. Vinh is a publicity and transparency. It is a system of value reflected through the way we exercise the decision-making rights. In Article 28 of the Constitutions of Vietnam, there are 2 things. The first of all, the citizens' rights, and secondly, the state will facilitate or enable it. So all the statements, all the declarations we also have in laws and in constitutions. If we develop a checklist for ticking, it will be an exhaustive list regarding the institutions, declaration, and progressive viewpoints. But we are confused about implementation. This is a draft law, and in the National Assembly Forum discussion, we go with the direction to develop the laws to implement some special measures, specific measures for grassroots democracy implementation. We will not discuss about the democratic rights. The democracy rights, they will be larger, more broadened. This is a draft law which is more into technical issues of implementation and refine some of our previous methods or measures, and what works, what haven't worked so far. For example, the 2 focuses, the 2 main focal institution, it is the People's Inspection Board and Community Investment Supervision Board. So decision making at the grassroots level, how it should be made so that people have the right to know, to discard, to do check, supervise, and benefit. The most basic concept is decision making, but it should be under the framework of the law, because the law provides everything. If we are attached to institutions and administrative unit, I think such a law is not a focus, because we have different laws as well. We also have the supervision law. There's a chapter on the People's Inspection Board. So should we separate the People's Inspection Board from the law on inspection? And we also have the public investment law. So we need to care about the focus of the draft law. In my opinion, for example, the models and the institutions, we need to go to the grassroots levels to understand. Grassroots level is the level which is closer to the people than the administrative levels, closest to the people. we haven't got the administrative level that can reach the people as close as that of the grassroots level. So I mentioned one thing about the People's Inspection Board. Ms. Lian just mentioned that People's Inspection Board, I select one point for this. Regarding the People Inspection Board, at the agency and unit and employees employment board level, here we open up the governing scope to the employers or the workers employing organizations. There's debate in the National Assembly whether to include the workers employing workers organization into this draft law or not. The People's Inspection Board will be more effective at the community ward and township level and not very efficient at the agency level, because there will be a bottleneck. We consider inspection is the eye and the ear of the head. So how can we supervise the head? In a state agency, I was the head of inspection board of a state agency, but with the current design, the technical measures now are not enough to handle or to create the independence of the People's Inspection Board, or to create the democracy in decision making at the grassroots level. The last point regarding the institutions, you can see that in the draft law, we mentioned about the two institutions, which is VFF and trade union, because whether it is People's Inspection Board or Community Independent Supervision Board, they are dependent on these institutions. They are dependent on the VFF and trade union. For this, they are under the leadership of the People's Party Commission, District Party Commission. All other institutions in the system, you can see that the trade union and VFF, they are the two institutions directly mentioned in the very first provisions of the constitutions. The parties, committees that are leading, and it provides the overall guidelines for VFF institutions and trade union institutions. So the law cannot denote that, but in the actual implementation, it will largely dependent on the party commission level and the control of the state power. We haven't discussed or touched that point. Where will the parties commission play most important role? We can promote the role of those institutions. If we do not attach to the administration institution or the trade union or the VFF, it should be the self-governing mechanism or institutions. In the Article 28 of the Constitutions, the state need to provide more self-governing institutions to operate. Not everywhere do we need the self-governing bodies. For example, at the residential area level, where they have the condo or apartment buildings, what kind of institution can the people rely on? a residential area is not an administrative level. So what about the operations of the institutions? It needs to be operated based on the basic interest and legitimate rights, so that people can have more practical contributions. So it related to the role of the CSOs in providing the inner motivation for the direct participants in those non-administrative institutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thiem. And I learned a lot from your sharing from Mr. Thiem and Mr. Dung. And I also agree with that. You know, from our field trip, we realized that the people may find it very difficult if the institution is not at the grassroots level. So the research show that if the investor is the commune government, then the local people, they provide a lot of comments and feedbacks, and they can supervise. But if the investor is the district government, and even when the local people has the right to participate, but they can only raise their voice to the commune government, and then the commune government will report back to the district government, and the people, local people, they cannot report directly to the district government. So that is a challenge. And I think that it is very important that the local people have the right to participate in the decision making at the community level. And last but not least, I would like to talk about a issue that is quite common in big cities. In Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, a large percentage of people are living in condos, and more people are living in condos. So the condo management board is not considered as an administrative level yet, but I think it is very necessary to talk about the role of the condo supervision and management board. So we talk a lot about the participation of people, and now we will talk with Mr. Tu. So Mr. Tu is an insider, and he is also participate in the condos management board. And Mr. Tu, I would like to ask for your opinion about grassroots democracy. And you know, as you are the insider, you participate in your condo management board. What do you think? Well, I played many roles, so I tried to talk as the role of a member of the condo management board. So before I give you some specific examples, I would like to say that I'm quite agree with our panelists. So far, we have a lot of regulations regarding the democracy and grassroots democracy so far. And when we drafting the law on grassroots level, grassroots democracy implementation, we focus more on how to realize the grassroots democracy. So about the vision, the principles, I think is already very clear, and I hope that the law on the grassroots democracy will pay more attention on how to realize that grassroots democracy in practice. So when I look at the organization of the condo management board and give some suggestions, well, I have a few. So the condo where I'm living was put into use in 2010, and then the management board was established a few years after that. After many years of fighting with the investor, we finally reclaimed the right to manage the condos so that we can manage, we can operate the condo where we are living. So the people living in the condo, they have the right to establish a condo management board. They will act on behalf of the people to operate the condo and to manage the condo. And the condo management board will collect the opinion of the people and find out the issues happened in the condo and will ensure the rights of the people living in that condo. I think this model is similar to like a grassroots democracy model, and the grassroots here in this context is a condo. So refer back to the time when we were fighting with the investor to reclaim our rights. It happened for 3 years, as I remembered. We sent a lot of complaints to the People's Committee, to the media, to the National Assembly's agencies, and we even organized discussions or dialogues with the Department of Constructions. And finally, after 3 years, we have the right to manage and operate the services in the condo where we are living. And we had the right to establish a condo management board. And so far, the condo management board work very well. And if we have any issues, then we can send our complaints to the management board via a Zalo group. It's just like a WhatsApp group. So, the condo management board, they don't provide the service by themselves, but they will hire a contractor to provide the service. And then when we have any issues with the service, we will report that to the condo management board, and then the condo management board will work with the contractor to resolve the issue. So if we consider a condo as a grassroots level, there's a few points we can draw on. First is the scope. I think the grassroots should be like closest to the people, and it should be as small as possible. For example, it can be at the hamlet level or the village level. We should prevent the overlapping between the grassroots democracy institution with other administrative institutions. We already have many models. For example, we have the Fatherland Front and we have the women's unions already. And they are all administrative institutions. Then for the community supervision group, they should be at the lowest or the grassroots area that close to home with the local people. It can be like a hamlet and village, and I think it is not necessarily the same as the administrative boundary based area. Secondly, the areas within their responsibilities, I think that they should participate in the areas that are close to the people's life. For example, they pay attention to those that can affect their rights and their lives. And of course, it can change. For example, at first, they can only pay attention to water supply, to environment, to the electricity supply, but later on, the scope of attention may be broadened. For example, they may want to know more about how the local budget is spent because they contribute to that budget. So I think we can start with the service that close to home, for example, education, environment, and utilities, and it will evolve over time. But we need to start somewhere. It should be start with something that close to the people, and then the scope of concern can be broadened over time. And there are two principles of democracy. First, everyone can raise their voice. However, we should have like a representative, and we should have a representative model. We should have a representative board which is voted by the people. If we implement the grassroots models, but we apply the top-down approach, then it may not work. And we should not have the grassroots organization for the sake of formality. I don't think it can be effective. It should be real. The grassroots supervision board should be voted by the people, and of course we should not use the administrative models when it comes to grassroots democracy. So that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thuy, for his very interesting sharing. You need to think whether it is something administrative or it is attachment of the residential areas or community residents. Thank you, Ms. Hong, for attending the panel today. So Ms. Lien is busy, so I would like Ms. Hong, the Deputy Director of the Department of Law and Democracy, BFF, to present. After Ms. Hong, we will open up the Q&A from the participants. So I would like Ms. Hong to have 5 to 7 minutes for her sharing. Scientists, researchers, ladies and gentlemen, my thanks to the organizers to invite me to speak here. I'm directly participating in the process of developing the draft law on grassroots level democracy implementation through the findings of the study and through the sharing from the experts. We can see that you mainly focus on implementation of grassroots democracy at commune ward and townships, and the governing scope is a Decree 34, and your concerns, I share with you the concerns, especially the findings of the study. Now, I would like to say that initially we expect to develop the draft law on democracy implementation at the township and in. But you know that this has been regulated in different legal documents. So democracy in its three types should be included in the grassroots democracy. That's why the current draft law submitted to the National Assembly, it governs the democracy in three types: democracy in the commune, ward, township, and in the administrative public sector and in businesses. And they are implemented under the party's instruction. I cannot provide details here, but with that guiding viewpoint, when we formulated the draft law, I'm from the VFF, so we only provide the supervision and social feedback, and the government assigned the MOHA and then the Legislative Committee of the National Assembly. So you can see that the formulation process is really serious and open up for learning. So the law regulations in this draft law need to overcome the shortcomings in the Decree 34. They only have the regulations for the state to practice democracy. There's a lack of people's exercise of their democracy rights. There are missing of the sanctions. That's why we have to overcome the shortcomings in the decree, the ordinance, and we need to reflect the party's guideline that Vietnam social political organizations should be the focal, and we will get the people-centered approach. The people have the right to know, discuss, do, check, supervise, and benefit. So in all the content you mentioned, some mentioned that democracy haven't been well reflected in the terminology of the draft law. It's very challenging for this draft law. There has been no requisite for this. There is no previous law on this. If you look at the Article 2, it includes the basis, the population community, to reflect the community and township and ward democracy. We talk about the village, hamlets, tribes, and residential areas, street clusters, etc. We have been trying to select different options to be included in the draft law and for interpretation of terms and words. You focus mainly on grassroots democracy at the commune and wards, but here we need to have democracy in the public sector and in the administrative units. Yesterday, you had some comment on businesses. You said that earlier we focused on the SOEs, but why should we separate between SOEs and private sector? BCCI and some business community, they had their voice, because when we emphasize that SOEs is funded from the state, we put more attention to them, and the practice of democracy in the SOEs are good. But recently a lot of private businesses violate seriously the law. So how should we reflect this in the draft law? What about other documents, for example, on collective bargaining, etc.? So that's my viewpoint in relation to businesses and SOEs and administrative units. Actually, in various agencies, they have supervision board, but it's quite perfunctory, and sometimes we only establish that in the community without establishing that board, supervision board in the agency because of their performance. The goal of developing of this draft law is that's why we need to develop the People's Supervision Committee, People's Inspection Board, and then the Community Investment Supervision Board at the residential area or community population. So here we talk about inspection activities. We considered a lot in order to reflect the role of the two boards to be effective. Currently, the Community Investment Supervision Board on the projects and for the new rural development programs are effective. But for some other projects, when the developers are from the provincial level, central levels, it may not work. If you read carefully, we have considered a lot regarding the supervision scope and the budget. And you can see that the public investment law, you have a maximum of 10 million VND for each commune. So, in fact, some communes have many projects, but some communes have no project. So if we require each project to develop the Community Investment Provision Board, you will only get the minimum of 10 million VND for each. And if we have 10 projects, it means we will have 10 boards. Because there are communes where no project is available. So we need to consider how we include the two boards into the draft law. You have 2 more minutes. Yeah, I'm going to finish. I would like to share about it's true that the grassroots level democracy at the population community, we have the administration or management board, condor management board. There's a lot of problems. The management board, the administration board, and then the project developer, there are so many problems among them. The issues to be handled should be dual. First of all, the implementation arrangement and the officer in charge, how much they pay interest to the issues. And we need to enhance the knowledge, awareness of people's rights. I've been involved in the Condor Administration Board. The residents asked me to be the member, and I've seen a lot of problems. For the administration board of the Condor, if we put the interest of the residents above all, it won't be effective. So practicing grassroots level democracy aim at awareness and the conscious needs or the heart of the officer in charge. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Ms. Hong, for her clarification in the process of developing the draft law. I would like to share with you quickly that the study from UNDP, we pay attention to the administration. We do not pay attention to public SOE or businesses. For us, what is related to population community is focal, very significant. Before I invite the direct question from all of you here, as Mr. Tung just mentioned, the grassroots democracy concept have different ideas. We will not focus much on it. We would like to focus more on how to implement the democracy. What are the institutions? What are the conditions? because we have many regulations on democracy in constitutions, how to make them applicable in real life. Maybe they are not exhaustive, but this is an opportunity to reflect the social needs. So when you discuss, please pay more attention to the practices, not the theoretical stuff. We wish you to focus on the grassroots democracy and what are the conditions, the institutions that are crucial. We have roughly 30 minutes, so any one of you here who have any comment or question, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Bing. And now we have online participants and direct participants.
So, I find that residential groups played a very important role. You know that for a very long time that the village regulations are even more important than the national regulations. So here the village is the smallest or the grassroots. The community groups that are closest to the local people. So, in the research, we also acknowledge the importance of the participation of the community groups or residential groups, as we mentioned. And attending the discussion, we have Mr. Thường here. So I have the question for you. Do you have any suggestions for us so that we can implement the law on grassroots democracy implementation effectively? May I invite Mr. Thương to come here and discuss with us? I would like to stand here. And very good morning to all of you. Good morning, and today we have a thematic discussion on grassroots democracy, and we had the chance to learn about some effective models, and you also provide some recommendations on the law on grassroots democracy implementation, which will be passed by the National Assembly in this fall. So I want to congratulate the research team, and the research topic is very realistic, very effective and timely, and you also made very good recommendations. And Ms. Liên and Ms. Hồng, I would like to say that grassroots democracy we have some debates. The first one is what is the grassroots level? What is the scope of one grassroots institution? And we even have some sub grassroots models as well. So I would like to clarify that sub-grassroots organizations, including the working group of the Fatherland Front, and we also have some unit in the local women's union, and we also have the People's Inspection Board and Community Investment Supervision Boards. So these two boards are at the grassroots level, and so far we only have some regulations on the operation of the grassroots organizations only, but we don't have any regulations on the sub-grassroots entities. So I think it's good if we can institutionalize this in the law. The next point I would like to mention is that we honor democracy, but it must be within our legal framework. So democracy should not be put higher than the law. And the next point I would like to say is that we need to enhance the capacity of the grassroots organizations. So at the moment, we have different models which is endorsed by the Vietnam Fatherland Front. So these models should not go against the law or the moral ethics. So the citizens are allowed to do anything that are not prohibited by the law. But so far, we do not have the regulations on the self-governing. And that's why the VFF endorsed such institutions. So, we do not have any clear regulations governing the community groups, entities, and that's why we are operating those models in the self-governing method. And as Ms. Hong already mentioned, there are some gaps in the law. So I agree with her. And there are 2 points I would like to recommend. First, we need to identify the way or the methods that the people can check and supervise. So the people can supervise by themselves. And when they can do that, they can only report to the Fatherland Front, to the party organization. The second method is that they can make complaints. They can file a complaint. So that these are 2 ways that people can supervise and report what they have seen. The second thing is that they can vote to establish a representative organization, and that that organization when representing the local people. For example, we have the Vietnam's Fatherland Front, and we have the women unions. So in this case, the local people, they entrust the representative organizations to supervise. And as I mentioned earlier, the democracy must be in line with the law. So officers, they are allowed to do that that is stated in the law. And similarly, democracy should have some kind of framework. Democracy, but we still need to adhere to the law. And I think we need to clearly identify the scope of people's supervision. Here we have the People's Inspection Boards and Community Investment Supervision Boards. These 2 boards are voted or established by the local people, not the Fatherland Front. So we need to clearly identify the scope of supervision. For example, the people can supervise the implementation of the law and policies. Secondly, they can supervise the handling of complaints. and they can supervise the implementation of the corruption law. So the people can supervise in these 4 areas. But we recommend to have like a self-governing model instead of having a legal or administrative model. And of course, we can recommend some points that have not been clearly clarified or governed by the law. Yeah, I agree. And you say that at the moment, many grassroots democracy models are piloting, and we do not have any like legal framework for that. And I also acknowledge that it would be very difficult for like these models to work without a legal framework. So I think that in the law they should say that the local people has the right to establish a community-based supervision organization when they find it necessary. And when there's a project or a policy that needs to be supervised, then the local people, they can establish a community supervision board. So of course there should be some flexibility. They have the right to establish such a supervision board, but it's not their responsibility. We may not need a community supervision board all the time. So I think we should have a regulation in the law that allowed the local people to establish a community supervision board when they want to.
Yeah, we would like to recommend that to be included in the law. Yeah. So I would like to invite the senior man. Can you introduce yourself? I'm from the Association of Science and Rural Development of Vietnam. I quite agree with the report presented earlier. If we set the issues of grassroots level democracy, how it is, we need to look at the root, which is the people's rights. Here there are something related. It is the state, the people, and then the implementing agencies of grassroots democracy. So I agree with your findings. What we need to focus now is at the grassroots level. And what is grassroots level? A central agency, is it a grassroots level agency? So coming back to the issues, the detection at the grassroots level about corruption, where is it stem from? Not any central agency can detect that, because it is for the interest of the leaders. But at the grassroots level, they can detect the wrongcomings from the assets, from the consumption, from the expenditure. So we should come back to the grassroots level. Are they the central agencies? Are they the businesses? It is just one part of the issues. So we need to look at the other part so that we can focus on what we need to do. Do not cover everything, or we can have a very confused point of view. That's why we need to set again the concept of grassroots level. Grassroots level are the lowest level in attachment to the people and law enforcement. And this time of drafting the law, we need to look at the roots of the issues to be addressed. when we discuss about the grassroots democracy, we need to identify what grassroots is and what should be the central point in order to develop the mechanism. Through your findings, I can see that possibly the current grassroots democracy, we need to look at the root causes. Why do we need to? Why we have the village convention? Why do we have them for so many years? Why do the village convention existed for so many years and they have the long life? So you need to focus and identify what grassroots level is, and out of the three relations between the state, people, and the law, people admire the law. The role of the state will be promoted then. For the laws, the law need to be in line with the needs of people. We need to come back to what grassroots is when we talk about grassroots democracy. Thank you very much. We will invite another participant. Thank you, Mr. Bing, for inviting me. I will not propose anything. Normally, I will have questions. My first one is on grassroots level and self-governing. For long, since the past, in societies, a self-governing body is the village and hamlet level, and it was popular. But after we come to our socialism, the self-governing rights of the hamlets and village have lost, and it is replaced by the state administrative units. So what can we do to propose a draft law which establish the rights of the grassroots unit of the village and the hamlet? What are the feasibility of those proposals? As suggested by Mr. Tham about the confusions in law enforcement, I have a question not for him but also other speakers, other panelists. What have led to the confusions in implementing the law on grassroots democracy implementation? What comes from the law? For example, the unclear definition on grassroots democracy. So the law have created the gaps or the restrictions, and then the implementation. Ms. Hong mentioned about the implementation arrangement. Maybe it is related to Mr. Ving's comment. It's not the implementation arrangement, but organization. Organization in a broader sense, we do not mention here. Is it the existence and recognition of the CSOs, which is weak, the weak recognition of the roles of CSOs? It leads to the overlapping in organization of grassroots level democracy. We haven't well recognized the role of CSOs. That's why the implementation is still restricted. My third question, when the state is making effort in development of the party commission in businesses, especially private businesses, why don't we strengthen the exercise of grassroots level democracy in enterprises, especially the private ones? Thank you for your question. They are quite challenging. So any panelist who can answer the question from different angles. First of all, how to recover the hamlet and village level authority. It's not administrative, but it has the important role in grassroots democracy implementation. This is a billion-dollar question. Why haven't democracy been practiced at grassroots level? Maybe he can find the root cause from the lack of recognition of the CSOs. So how can democracy can be implemented at the grassroots level and in real life? That is his second question. What is the third question? It is about the enterprises. He wished to have grassroots democracy in private businesses. So any panelists want to respond to his three questions? Mr. Vinh, can you share quickly? Dear Mr. Long, I will not answer all the three questions, but I can answer the very first one from you. The community population, it is stipulated in the election law since 2003. It is stipulated about the hamlet, village, tribes in general. It is a population community in general. And we have been conducted elections. It is not an administrative unit, but it is in attachment with the commune, ward, township, and for the urban area, they are called residential areas or street clusters. Regarding your confusion about the mechanism, implementation mechanism of the law in recent years, without the ordinance, without the decrees on grassroots democracy implementation, we cannot have what we have today. Regarding the inspection mechanism, since you know that the ordinance and the decree provides very clearly that at local level there are two kinds of inspections. Supervision, there are 7 supervision mechanisms. The party's supervision among the party and members, and then people's council supervision at the local level. The role of the people's councils. In addition, we have the VFF supervision and youth union, farmers union, women union, farmers union. Regarding the population community supervision, supervision from People's Inspection Board, supervision from Community Investment Supervision Board, we call that People's Supervision. Yeah, that I am at clarifying your question. At the commune level, we have 2 supervision boards. The Community Investment Supervision Board, they supervise all the program projects. That supervision board is under the commune. The second supervision board is related to the people. The community population can issue resolutions. To put it simply, what is related to the contributions from the pocket of the people will have a resolution, issue a resolution. They will vote the Community Investment Supervision Board until the termination of the construction work. So there are 2 types of supervision boards. Thank you, Mr. Vinh. Now I ask Mr. Tung, Dr. Tung, to share with us. Thank you, Uncle Long, for sharing your questions. From my viewpoint, ultimately, Democracy will be decided by the people in any country. The people is a key for any democracy. But in Vietnam, it's much related to the spirit, the social capital, ethics, cultural aspect. What you raised was the role of the CSOs to raise awareness of the people. The roles of education and information is important, but no actors can replace the independent CSOs, professional organizations, etc. And we also need to strengthen people's participation. What you raise about confusion, I'm not understanding about how we confused. If you read the Universal Statement on Democracy in 1998, they mention about the focus of democracy is election, competition, fair competitions, and freedom. Thank you. Mr. Tu and Ms. Hong. Mr. Tu, you want to share something? I would like to make some comments regarding Mr. Long's about confusion. There are two issues. Implementation, ineffective implementation. First, it is the scope of grassroots democracy. We only stipulate about the administrative management. It is the hamlet, commune, tribes. They are far from the daily life of the people. We need to go through to the lower institutions. It is the residential areas and lower forms of administration. It's difficult to select the right scope regarding administrative management. In fact, in order to strengthen the people's right, it will be the first point we are confused, and then implementation arrangement. The nature of democracy and grassroots level democracy, it should stem from the aspiration and willingness of the people, and then the representatives should be voted by the people. We are implementing a model which is not quite comprehensive. It is the administrative model. That's why both the scope and arrangement of implementation are having shortcomings. Thank you, Mr. Tu. Mr. Thiam, do you want to share something? Other people mentioned a lot of comments. I just want to add in relation to Mr. Long's and others' comments. It is a role of the soft institutions. In our system, we are focusing more on the hard institutions. So you use the word like confusion in exercising the institutions and the hard regulations reflected in the legal normative documents. We lack the buffering or the buffering part for the soft institutions. And the soft institution, for a long time we haven't noticed them, and we want to replace them by the hard institutions. So the soft one is like water, and we need stones in the water. But implementation, there are challenges. As a result of the water to support the stones representing the hard institutions. Those stones or rocks, when they collide, there will be issues or problems. And there is a lack of the water to support it as a soft mechanisms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists. We have one last question. So, one last question from the floor. Ms. Hương from UNDP, would you like to say anything? Good morning, my name is Hương. I'm managing the inclusion program of UNDP, working on persons with disabilities. I'm very happy to join this thematic discussion today, and I learned a lot from you as well as your recommendations to the law on grassroots democracy implementation. So I am working on ensuring the rights of persons with disabilities, and I would like to share with you some information about research we are doing on including the voice of persons with disabilities. To make sure that the voice of persons with disabilities are considered. So we also follow the three pillars of PAPI on the public administration, on public service provision, and the participation of people. The reason why we are conducting this research is that we have different groups, and among them the persons with disabilities are one of the most vulnerable, and the voice of persons with disability must be reflected in the policies. And not only the welfare policies, but other policies as well. And once the benefits of vulnerable groups, like persons with disabilities, are ensured, we can see that the rights of general people will be ensured. And it will be easier for us to realize our SDGs. We are piloting. Well, actually, we are working with Mekong Research Institute and DRI to conduct a survey with 1,600 persons with disabilities in various provinces. Due to the lack of data, we do not have the opportunity to choose a random samples as in a PAPI survey, but so far we managed to have a diverse voice of the persons with disabilities. We have respondents from different age groups, different ethnic minorities, and different backgrounds. And in the survey, we include topics similar to PAPI's. For example, on the use of healthcare service in public hospitals, and how persons with disability use public transportation services, and how many persons with disability have their name written in the land use right or certificates. So those areas are quite basic. And we also have some disability related topics, for example, like rehabilitation and disability identification. And we also collect 14 stories of persons with disabilities throughout the world, and we are aiming at publishing the research on the 17th of December, the Disability Day of Vietnam. And I'm looking forward to your attention to this service, and I hope that when you work on the grassroots democracy, please take the voice of persons with disability into account. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hương. So, due to time constraint, I would like to summarize our discussion. I think we have a high consensus that in Vietnam, it is necessary to have a legal framework for grassroots democracy so that the people can participate in the local governance and they can participate in different local activities. And there is also widely agreed that the grassroots level should be the one that closest to the people. It can be at the hamlet, at the village, or even the residential area. So it should be very close to the people so that the people can feel free to supervise and to participate. And many of you mentioned a soft mechanism, which is very important besides the hard mechanism. The soft mechanism include the experts, social organizations, those who can enhance the capacity of the people so that they have the capacity to participate in the supervision work and to realize their democracy rights. So that I just mentioned some main points in our today's discussion. I would like to thank our panelists for your enthusiastic sharing, and the topic is very important and it worth your attention. And I would like to thank UNDP and the PPWG for conducting the research, and I hope that we can communicate the grassroots democracy in a broader scope. And once again, I would like to thank all participants for coming here in the Green UN House and joining us online. And once again, thank you very much, and I wish you a good lunch and a safe trip back home. Thank you very much, and before you leave, may I kindly ask you to go to the stage so that we can have a group photo. We will remove the chairs and the tables so that we can take a group photo together.